This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to the Hindu's In Focus podcast. I am Nivedita V. Ahead of the budget, there was a lot of expectation that the government would provide some relief for the middle class, and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman delivered. In her budget speech, she announced that there will be no income tax for incomes up to 12 lakh rupees. Of course, this stole the show, but it isn't the only big news. The union budget had several tax reforms and initiatives to improve infrastructure, the ease of doing business, and financial inclusion. As the budget session draws to an end, I talked to Professor Bhagwan, Associate Professor and the Head of Department of Economics at the Loyola College in Chennai, to know more about the various good, the bad, or rather aspects that need work, and the opportunities that arise from this budget. Hello, Professor, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Hindus in Focus podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, sir, let's start with the good aspect of it. The big one, the income tax relief. This is the biggest tax cut for the middle class ever in the union budget. It is a very good step for the middle class. Can you tell us why this is an important step for the economy?
Thank you, Nivedita, for inviting me for this podcast. This is one of the big measures that this budget has conveyed to the entire country. Last year's growth performance slowed down. We are expected to grow at 6.4 or 6.5% in real terms, in terms of our GDP growth. A large part of this is because of decline in consumption, declining demand, and that's the problem that the country has faced in the last few years. Private consumption and individual consumption is declining because people are not having enough purchasing power or enough money put into their pockets. Now, this measure has released 1 lakh crores of rupees into the purchase to the hands of the individuals. This is in terms of direct tax foregone by the government of India. So 1 lakh crores is now put into the hands of the general public or the taxpayers. In addition to that, 2,600 crores of indirect tax revenue has also been foregone by the government. So you can add another 2,600 crores to this. So you can expect the purchasing power of the people to increase by 1,02,600 crores, which will be a big boost for the demand for various types of products and services offered by the producers in the country.
So it's a huge relief for the middle class, but for the government, they are losing a lot of revenue. The government is staring at a 1 trillion rupee revenue loss. How will the government pay for schemes if it's facing such a huge revenue loss?
The government is banking on giving a big push to demand. So if there is a big push to consumer demand, and that will incentivize producers, and then when production goes up and the economy starts growing at 7 to 8% per year, there will be an increase in revenue flow to the government of India. The indirect taxes, especially GST, has shown an improvement each year. So the government probably wants to compensate the loss of direct tax revenue with the increase in GST revenues. Also, the government has plans for monetizing its assets. Monetization of assets will bring in several crores to the government kitty. And of course, the government is banking on market borrowings. The government's market borrowings, including the borrowings of the state governments, are expected to touch around 15 lakh crores, or in your terms, 15 trillion rupees, which is pretty good. So this is how the government is planning to make up for the loss of direct tax revenue, or some amount of customs duty loss, but basically through market borrowings, through increase in GST revenues, and through capitalization of government, monetization of government assets or capital assets, monetization of government capital assets.
How quickly can we see the revenue from the loss of revenue being compensated?
Well, if the government's plans go ahead with regard to monetization of capital assets, and also with regard to the push that will come to the private consumption and the demand for goods and services, obviously there'll be an improvement in indirect tax revenue. Also, in direct taxes, please do remember tax compliance will improve, will increase with lower rates of income taxes and a wider tax slabs and the exemption that is given by the government of India. We might see more people complying with declaring their true incomes, and this tax compliance, may also actually contribute to an increase in income tax revenues.
So, if people are not declaring their true income for tax purposes, why would they start doing it now? Lower taxes will not prod them to do so, because what if in the next round, in a couple of years, they increase taxes?
You see, one of the reasons why people may not be very honest with their true incomes is because of the high rates of personal income tax and the smaller slabs that were followed previously. People were feeling the burden of paying taxes because they were also already burdened with, high cost of living, with rent payment or repayment of housing loans and interest on housing loans and various other expenses that they have to incur on health, education, transport, and so on and so forth. So there was probably a disincentive for people to declare their true incomes. I'm not talking about salaried classes. The salaried classes, their incomes are an open book. But I'm talking about those who are non-salaried, who may actually be coming into the tax bracket, but may not be revealing their true incomes because of the high rates of taxation and the smaller slabs of income tax.
I want to move on to another set of topic. The government also gave a lot of importance to exports and MSMEs, hoping that all of this will kick in the manufacturing sector, which has been not doing so well lately. Can these schemes help the manufacturing sector improve right away, or are we seeing a trickle down effect? Are we seeing that this scheme will? Are we seeing that these announcements, the implementation will take time, and therefore the manufacturing sector will get a helping hand 2, 3, 4 years from now?
You see, there are some major items of export which India has been traditionally known for: leather, textiles, gems, and jewelry. I think the government has addressed all their concerns and given them significant reliefs, tax reliefs or otherwise, and given them a boost so that they can improve their export performance. In addition, the government also has cut basic customs duties, simplified the rates of basic customs duties. I think it provided exemption from basic customs duties. I believe now there are only 7 rates of basic customs duties or 8 rates of basic customs duties. So this will enable a lot of manufacturers to export their products, especially smartphones, for example. Smartphones have become big export earners for us, and the government has reduced the basic customs duty and provided exemptions and reliefs for customs taxation purposes to all the components, inputs, and all the materials that go into the manufacture of smartphones. One of the good things that the government of India has been doing of late is, there's something called inverse taxation. That is, it is always advisable to tax the finished imported product at a higher rate as compared to the imported inputs. But there was a time when we were taxing the imported inputs at a higher rate as compared to the finished product. I think that concern has been totally addressed, and now we believe the government is taxing the imported inputs for the manufacture of smartphones and other electronic devices at a much lower rate as compared to the finished products. And this will see a big jump in India's exports of electronic goods, especially smartphones.
But we didn't see any major announcement for the PLI scheme, for example. How does that play out? How do the two work together?
The performance linked incentive scheme has been there. It's continuing. It's not that the government has withdrawn the scheme. The government may not have added any further measures to the scheme, but I think the focus is still on improving productivity, efficiency, and improving performance. So you show results, you get the benefit. And this is like, offering them a carrot. You offering them a carrot, saying that you show results, you get whatever credit or tax benefit that you are aspiring for.
That's a very interesting aspect, the ease of doing business. I want to talk to you about that in a little bit of detail a while from now. But I want to talk to you about the agricultural sector. The government announced very interesting schemes for the agriculture sector. It wants to increase the amount of money spent on funding high yielding crops, cotton, oil seeds, pulses. They want to increase the production of all of these crops. So, what is the government saying for these things?
See, agriculture received a lot of support in the previous budget, and because of that, the agriculture sector grew at 3.8% in the current financial year. Unfortunately, some amount of fund allocation reduction has taken place in this year's budget. But then the government is very clear on its focus areas in agriculture. It wants to focus on pulses, it wants to focus on oil seeds, it wants to focus on cotton, it wants to focus on those commodities that add value to our economy and to our GDP. Now, people have talked about food inflation. The food inflation is seasonal. There's no doubt about that. But then a large part of the food inflation is because of the high prices of pulses and oil seeds. So that could be maybe because of a shortage of pulses and oil seeds in the domestic market. And we are importing pulses and oil seeds from Southeast Asian countries and elsewhere. So the government is trying to give a boost to pulses and oilseeds production, and that will improve the supply side. So once you improve the supply side of these food commodities, obviously their prices will stabilize or come down, and food inflation will also be addressed. Another thing I would also like to mention here is they are talking in terms of setting up a food processing technology institute in Bihar, but that is not for the immediate term. There will be benefits that will arise out of this in the next 5 years. And it's also a welcome measure that they are talking about improving the technology of food production and processing. A lot of benefits for fisheries also. We are talking about only agriculture, but fisheries receive a lot of benefit. For example, the basic custom duties on fish paste and some of the things that are required for fish feed and shrimp feed, they have all been exempted from custom duty, or they are subject to lower rates of custom duty. So the government is certainly addressing the worries and concerns of the agricultural sector and the fishing and dairy sector or dairy farm sector. But there's so much that you can do in a year. It is, I would say, the government has focused itself on for the next 5 years. This is a continuing process. What they have started last year, they have continued this year, and hopefully they'll continue in the coming years. But I'm unhappy that they have cut allocation for certain aspects of agriculture. For example, for the consumer welfare sector, they have cut funds for certain types of agricultural activities, which probably the finance minister will have to relook and maybe make the necessary corrections.
So, some experts believe that the government should not focus that much on providing incentives to the dairy sector and the fishing sector, because India is in the top 5 of these sectors, if not in the top 2. What's your take on it?
Yeah, we may be basically a country blessed with marine resources because, on three sides we have the ocean, and therefore we have plenty of marine resources to exploit. But then we are facing stiff competition from Southeast Asia, from our neighbor Sri Lanka, and also from other fish producing and fish exporting countries. Technologically, we are still not that advanced as compared to our competitors. So if the government addresses that concern, which it has done in this budget, we should be enjoying a competitive advantage over our rivals in the fishing sector as well as in the dairy farm sector.
So, some experts are also saying that the government missed a chance to bring in more reforms to the core agricultural sector. What's your take? What are some of the reforms that they should be looking at and they haven't looked at in the sector?
Oh, they have already implemented many reforms. For example, we have now online trading of agricultural commodities. We have online agricultural markets, and they have provided access to credit online for farmers. The credit card scheme that they have, up to 5 lakhs farmers can benefit. They use Kisan credit cards. They have also facilitated export of agricultural produce, removed several bans that they have had in recent times on export of agricultural agricultural commodities. No, we have had bans on the export of onions, on the export of other agricultural products, including basmati rice. There was a time when there was some restriction placed on the export of basmati.
Non-basmati rice, yeah, non-basmati rice.
Yeah, so non-basmati rice, right. So non-basmati rice. Thanks for the correction. But now the government has removed all that. So I don't see why people should say that the government has not brought in enough reforms. I don't think we can bring in more reforms because there is a resistance from the farmers, and the farmers unions are resisting any technological change that is going to hurt their basic interests. So I think it's a fine balancing act. It's a fine balancing act between bringing in enough modern technology and modern technological change in the agriculture sector, at the same time catering to the traditional positions or requirements of the farmers.
Sir, I would like to move on to a newer aspect which we spoke a little bit about in brief earlier, the ease of doing business of states. The economic survey called for the states to open up their economies to allow industries in, and the economic survey went so far as to say that the states are going to be the driver of India's growth story. The budget announced an index called the Investment Friendliness Index of States, which is, I suppose, a measure of the ease of business doing of the states by itself. Can these initiatives really bring reforms on the ground, seeing that legislations and implementations of major reforms on land and labor are still pending?
Well, that's a good question. I must appreciate the finance minister for roping in the states into the proposals of the central government. That means the central government has now accepted that the states have an equal stake in the economic growth of India, just as the central government has. It's also not only recognizing their equal role in our economic development, but also giving them equal responsibility for our economic development. So you have made the states for the first time stakeholders in central projects. And then the government of India probably has also been reading up on the economic survey, which said that there's too much regulation which is hurting the ease of doing business. So the government in this budget has tried to reduce regulation as much as possible to promote ease of doing business. So the investment friendliness index is a way of promoting what they call as competitive cooperative federalism between the center and the states, and between the states. So now states will have to take this as a challenge and improve the environment for business investment in their respective jurisdictions. So this index will tell us which state is more open to private investment, to foreign investment, and the ease of doing business, and which states are acting as an obstacle. I want to point out one more thing here. The government's infrastructure budget this year is around 12 lakh crores. It's similar to what was done last year. I am very happy they are continuing with their infrastructure push. But what I'm not happy is that there should be better planning of infrastructural projects. There must be better integration of infrastructural development between the center and the states, as well as within the regions of the state itself. I would also request the government to create an index of the quality of infrastructure which is developed, just as they are having an index of investment friendliness of the states. Create an index of infrastructural quality by monitoring the quality of work done within the states and by the states, and that will actually make the citizens feel that the money has been well spent.
That was my exact next question to you, sir. How are we going to measure investment friendliness of different countries? Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana to an extent have good infrastructure to back up their investment friendliness. States, West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, the Northeast, they do not have such developed infrastructure. When that is not in place, is it enough just to have an index to say these states are doing much better than the other?
Yeah, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. That's actually a very relevant question. We must learn lessons from our neighbors, especially from China. The reason why Chinese economy is so productive and they have captured the global markets in various products, name the product and you know that China has a competitive advantage there. It's because of their productivity. And the productivity is based on their infrastructure. Even 20, 30 years ago, when we had one Bharat Mala connecting the north, south, and east, west, they had several such Bharat Malas. When we had one airport per city, they had 2 or 3 airports per city. So it is not just infrastructure, but the quality of infrastructure which can bring down the cost of doing business, and it will make our products cheaper globally. Its ease of doing business must also go with ease of travel and ease of transporting goods and services. So the government of India must give enough attention to ease of travel and ease of transporting goods and services along with the ease of doing business. If these three go together, then our productivity will be pretty high, our costs will come down, and India will certainly have a competitive edge with regard to our rivals.
Sir, I would like to talk about another aspect that you discussed very briefly, asset allocation. So, asset allocation, is the government talking about asset allocation only because they're not able to privatize PSUs?
No, one is, we still have a preamble which says that India is a socialist republic. So 100% privatization of PSUs will not take place immediately.
100% no. We are even struggling to sell two banks that we've been thinking about selling for like the past 10 years or so.
But again, we are not selling, we are not trying to sell them 100%. We are only selling them in installments, right? We are offering part of the share capital for the general public as well as for foreign investors. There is resistance politically here. We cannot totally divest our public sector enterprises. But then this monetization of capital assets is a way of trying to, release money from already existing assets so that you can create new assets. For example, LIC. LIC, a part of the share capital was put up for sale, and then the government realized the money which was used again for creating infrastructure. So if you are talking in terms of 11 lakh crores or 12 lakh crores of infrastructure in the form of roads, railways, airports, seaports, flyovers, and digital infrastructure, and so on, communication infrastructure, you have to raise money in different ways. And one of the ways is monetizing the existing public sector assets. But again, we cannot do it given the global environment in which we are living. There has been a flight of capital from the emerging economies to the US. Now, this is not the right time to talk about total divestment or divestment of PSUs, because there's global uncertainty with regard to capital flows. We have to wait for a year, let the global environment settle down, and then probably we can think in terms of PSU divestment. But right now, we can only do it step by step.
So I wanted to ask you about privatization as a whole. Why is India Inc. not buying PSUs? We've been struggling for such a long time to privatize companies, even in portion. Why is that? Why is India Inc. not interested in PSUs?
No, one is there is a political pressure. We have a very strong political left, which is opposed to total privatization of public enterprises. The other thing is, it's not that we have not been able to privatize. For example, Air India. Air India, we have privatized it. Air India was a sick enterprise for many years, many decades. It was actually being lifted up by taxpayers' money, budget transfers. Public taxpayers' money was being used to support Air India, but we were able to successfully sell that to a private buyer. So it's not as though we cannot do it and we haven't done it. If we are not doing it, we may be because we have some strategic objectives in mind. Also because there is pressure from political parties and unions, especially, which are opposed to total privatization. For example, banking. When the 1997 Southeast Asian financial crisis occurred, the only country in this part of Asia which was not affected was India. The whole of Southeast Asia was affected badly, adversely because of the Southeast financial crisis. India was not affected in 97-98 because our financial system was still controlled by the government. And that's one of the reasons why we did not become financially bankrupt. So that could also be a strategic objective of the government of India, as not to let go the entire financial sector. Also, what happens if there are sanctions. We have seen how the global world, that is the international community, has been sanctioning the financial systems of countries either through the multilateral forums or unilaterally. And we would not like to be in a situation, God forbid, where our financial system is cut out of these international financial networks. Then that will be a very sad day for the country.
Sir, I would like to ask you about a bigger question. Has the government done enough in this budget to help increase private investments? And also, is it addressing the question of low wage growth in India?
See, the government has brought in reforms, many reforms. We have seen, for example, ease of doing business reform, and then lowering of customs duties, and then the income tax reform that we have seen in terms of slab rates as well as lowering of tax rates. It has also brought in reforms specific to individual sectors. For example, power sector, nuclear energy, electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. So all these reforms should give a fillip to manufacturing and to private investment and private production. And that can probably contribute to greater demand for workers and improved wages and increased wages. One of the reasons why wage growth has not taken place is probably supply is exceeding demand. Simple economics. Supply exceeds demand in the labor market, therefore the wages are either low or they are stagnant. Now, with all these reforms that I mentioned, tax reforms, reforms with regard to insurance sector, the 100% FDI in insurance of various kinds, health, general insurance, automobile insurance, and so on and so forth, and other reforms in nuclear energy, in power distribution, and so on. For example, take power distribution. If discoms carry out power sector reforms, states can borrow additionally 0.5% of their GDP. And Tamil Nadu is the biggest beneficiary of this measure. We have been implementing discom reforms in the last few years, and we have also got a benefit of having borrowing capacity extended up to 3.5% of a state gross domestic product. So these are all reforms that the government of India has been promoting in the last 5-6 years. Certainly, if the demand for labor picks up because of improved production and manufacturing activities, obviously wages will improve.
So finally, before I let you go, I saw a couple of opportunities that India can build in the future. So last year, the government announced allowing SMRs in nuclear sector. Now they're announcing even bigger plans. The government has announced funds for deep tech research, and they're also focusing on improving urban infrastructure. What are some of the opportunities that you are seeing in this budget? Some things that build on the future.
Yeah, this fund of funds scheme that the government has, a lot of technically qualified people are interested in their own startups. The government has extended that income tax benefit for startups from 3 years exemption to another 5 years. So up to 8 years, you need not have to pay tax on your profits. And then you have access to credit provided by angel funds. So this fund of funds is a very good measure that is going to encourage new entrepreneurship, young entrepreneurship, and also higher risk taking. Something like the Shark Tank that we know of the West. So here we have a lot of these guys who are acting like Shark Tanks, and they are funding new entrepreneurs who are likely to take up risky business proposals or risky investments. So this is an opportunity. Okay, and there is an opportunity in the kind of fillip that the government is giving to the electronic sector. India probably can become the global producer and supplier of electronic goods. We may probably rival China or even overtake China in this. So this is another opportunity. I think the less regulation there is, the better it will be for the economy and for private investors. And the government has recognized that. They are trying to bring in regulation reforms. They have appointed panels, special expert panels for this. The government has appointed expert panel to suggest ways by which you can bring down regulation, improve ease of doing business. So there's an opportunity here. Once the panel submits all those areas where regulation can be lowered or eliminated, then there will be a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs. Please understand that India is no longer, a government-led, government-controlled, government-dictated economy. India is moving towards market economy, and the pillar of market economy are the investors, the producers, the wealth creators, the entrepreneurs, and the government is trying to support them in all ways by providing adequate infrastructure, also by providing access to credit, access to insurance, access to foreign investment, access to good policy, minimum regulation. So I see this as an opportunity. You cannot be the number one economy in the world, or we aspire to be the top or one among the top three economies. Right now, we are somewhere in the fourth or fifth place. We'll like to move to the third place, or probably even the second place. What can bring about that change is our entrepreneurship, and we need to support entrepreneurs to good policy. This budget is continuing the policy measures that it has initiated last year. The policy measures are all pro-investment, pro-demand, pro-business activity, and pro-growth. If people do not take advantage of the measures, then we are to be blamed, not the policymakers.
On that note, thank you, Das, for joining us today.
Thank you, Nivedita.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.